That day could have ended so tragically. But instead, we just went home. And that's when I realized something terrifying. Nothing ever really happened, unless I reacted. That day could have ended so tragically. I sat there in the car, staring at the knife, waiting for him to come back with bandages from the store. My arm was burning, but what hurt more was the silence. Because in that moment, I knew something I wasn't ready to admit yet. I knew that if I didn't start looking out for myself, no one else was going to. I bandaged my arm as we drove off, and he made it clear. This was my fault. I shouldn't have pushed the knife that hard. I should have been more careful. I should have listened better. And just like that, it was over. No apology. No concern. No processing what had just happened. We just moved on. I remember sitting there for a minute, trying to understand what was happening. I felt confused, bewildered. Something about the dynamics of this relationship didn't feel right. But I couldn't put my finger on it. There was excitement. There was intensity. There was passion. And right alongside it, fear, anxiety, a constant sense of unease. What I did start to notice was this. I was never allowed to be down, disappointed, or sad. My emotions slowly became a problem. And I'm a sensitive person. I cry when I get overwhelmed. That's always been true about me. One day, while we were visiting my family, he laughed and said, "Did she always cry a lot growing up? She cries about everything, doesn't she?" And my family, jokingly, not knowing it was a setup, agreed. Yeah, I guess she kind of does. From that moment on, my tears became ammunition. If I cried after he said or did something hurtful to me, he'd say, "Stop crying. You cry about everything." So I tried my best not to show much emotion around him. Eventually, he realized that door-to-door knife sales weren't going to bring in any money. So he decided to focus on his music career. He said he just needed better equipment. That better equipment meant more business. And since I had excellent credit, we used it. We bought everything he said he needed to build a home studio amounting to thousands of dollars. I asked him what the plan was to pay it back. He said we'd just pay the minimum. Until his big break. Everything would be fine. He was so convinced that this equipment was all he needed to make his music career take off. And I believed him. He was talented. A great pianist. Why wouldn't I believe in him? But the truth was, he did a few local gigs. Nothing consistent. Nothing close to enough. And he stayed home, all day, every day, while I worked. Late at night, he'd be up making music. And of course I want my husband to be in bed with me at night time, but sometimes when I'd ask him if he was coming to bed, he seemed annoyed and disgusted with me. After a few times of asking him to come to bed, he snapped.
"Why do you keep asking me to come to bed when there's nothing going on in the bed?"
That sentence changed something in me. I learned to only invite him to bed if something was planned. That would come back to haunt me later. That also gave him freedom. Freedom to stay up late. On the phone. Mostly with female friends. He said he was counseling them. Helping them spiritually. One even sent inappropriate photos. He showed me proudly, saying he had nothing to hide. But he never stopped putting himself in those situations. Eventually, it stopped bothering me. At least I could sleep. At least I wasn't being kept up all night arguing about the most ridiculous things. But there was a huge issue emerging that we did need to talk about. We were drowning in debt. Studio equipment. Credit cards. Expensive clothes. Fancy dinners. 2 brand new vehicles, because he didn't want to drive an old one. Collectors started calling my parents' house. Because the debt was in my name, ruining my amazing credit. I was humiliated. On the way to my parents' house, I asked him again about getting a job. He said we could just file bankruptcy. I hated that idea. I was studying finance. How would that look? I suggested a regular job. That's when he snapped. He started yelling, clenching his fist.
I said it's not a big deal. Now drop it. You talk too much.
And then, he punched the windshield. Right in front of me. I cried. And he screamed louder.
Stop crying. You act like I hit you.
And again I sat, trying to understand what was happening. What I did wrong. And what I could have done differently to change the outcome of that conversation. When we arrived at my parents' house, my dad asked what happened to the windshield. Do you think he answered? No. He stayed silent. And I answered for him. Something hit it on the freeway. Why didn't I let the silence sit? I don't know. But by then, I already believed that somehow it was my fault. I never wanted to see that rage again. I got the windshield fixed. And we moved on. Until the next blow up. And the next. I didn't have words for it yet. But I knew this wasn't right. I felt like I had to tiptoe around him. I didn't want to disturb whatever it was in him that I was disturbing. He would try to convince me that everything was my fault, telling me that I was doing something weird in my head or twisting my words around and telling me I wasn't making sense. I started whispering truths to myself. I'm not crazy. What I'm saying makes sense. It was annoying and I thought he was just being a jerk, trying to get his way. And then he said something that would change everything. He wanted us to move away. He wanted to be in a big city to meet well-known people in the music industry. But that would put us far away from my family, far from anyone who could see the red flags. At the time, I thought the move would make things better between us. It would make him happy. It would make both of us happy. And it did, until he was no longer happy with me. To hear more of my story, please subscribe for the next video. Like and share with someone you care about. Let me know in the comments where you are in your journey to Empath Empowered.